Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we'll explore what The Shining is. Within Stephen King's vast and complex imagination, there is an idea that stands out above many others, not only because of the unsettling nature of its essence, but also due to its profound symbolic weight and its cross-cutting impact on virtually his entire body of work, a skill known as the shine, also called The Shining. We are not dealing with a simple paranormal phenomenon designed to provoke superficial awe or fear, but rather with one of the invisible pillars that uphold the Kingian multiverse. The Shine acts as a hidden thread connecting stories, eras, characters, and realities that, at first glance, seem to have no relation to one another. Far from being an isolated narrative device, the Shine functions as a common language between different worlds, a sort of shared code that allows us to understand that all these stories are part of a larger, unified structure. Thanks to this concept, Stephen King ensures that his universe does not feel fragmented, but interconnected from the shadows, as if each story were a piece of a vast cosmic puzzle. The Shine not only amplifies the supernatural dimension of his tales, but also silently binds them together, granting an internal coherence that reveals itself only to those who pay close attention. Throughout his work, this ability is presented as an extraordinary gift of unpredictable scope, deeply connected to the human mind and to forces that transcend ordinary comprehension. Not all characters who possess the Shine experience it in the same way, and much of its fascination lies there. In some cases, it manifests as heightened psychic sensitivity, allowing for mental communication, the perception of others' thoughts, or the anticipation of future events. In other instances, the Shine takes on far more extreme and dangerous expressions: telekinesis, fire control, apocalyptic visions, direct influence over the will of others, or even the ability to interact with entities existing outside our reality. The Shine is not a uniform ability, nor is it limited in scope. It is a living, mutable force that adapts and molds itself according to the personality, emotions, traumas, and mental strength of the one channeling it. In the hands of a sensitive child, it can become a curse difficult to comprehend. In an unstable mind, it can degenerate into destruction. And in someone with a strong will, it can transform into a tool to withstand unimaginable horrors. This variability makes the Shine profoundly human, despite its supernatural origin. Without exaggeration, we are facing one of the most fascinating and complex concepts in both Stephen King's literary legacy and its cinematic adaptations. Essentially, the Shine functions as a form of genuine magic within the multiverse that the author has built over decades. But it is not conventional magic, with clear rules or defined limits. It is a raw, dangerous, and often incomprehensible force that exists independently of the will of those who possess it. It is not a simple narrative shortcut to resolve specific conflicts, but a real energy within that fictional universe. A constant presence that acts, influences, and leaves profound consequences at various levels in each story. Moreover, this power is not limited exclusively to the events narrated in The Shining or Dr. Sleep. Understood as a deep psychic manifestation, The Shine spans much of Stephen King's bibliography, connecting works as seemingly disparate as The Dark Tower, The Green Mile, Pet Sematary, and Carrie. In all of these, there are characters who, in one way or another, channel abilities that directly relate to this same underlying energy, even if it is not explicitly named. Even in IT, clear traces of the Shine can be identified, which is particularly revealing because it demonstrates how this force takes unique forms depending on the individual manifesting it. In some characters, it is expressed almost imperceptibly, as extraordinarily sharp intuition, unusual emotional sensitivity, or a special connection to deep memories and fears. In other cases, it reaches immense and openly supernatural levels, capable of confronting or fueling ancestral horrors that exist beyond time and space. Therefore, reducing the shine to mere mind reading or telepathy would be a serious mistake. Its nature is far broader, more complex, ambiguous, and dangerous. Precisely for this reason, in this analysis, we will delve into the true origin of the shine, examining what it really represents within Stephen King's narrative universe and why it does not manifest the same way in all human beings. We will explore how this ability is connected to destiny, trauma, sacrifice, and cosmic forces that surpass any rational understanding. We will also review specific examples of characters who possess this capability, analyzing the particular powers they develop thanks to it, and the unique way the shine manifests in each of them throughout the author's various works. With that said, it is time to delve into the deepest core of the topic. To understand the true origin of the shine, it is essential to look at the Dark Tower saga, where Stephen King introduces one of the most transcendental and fundamental concepts of his entire multiverse, the Ka. Commonly translated as the Wheel of Destiny, this term represents much more than a mere philosophical notion. Ka is, in essence, the direct manifestation of the will of God, also known as the Other, the supreme entity and creator of the Dark Tower. The tower is the axis that maintains the balance of all realities and dimensions existing within King's universe. It is the anchoring point that prevents worlds from collapsing upon one another. God, as a primordial and creative force, is not only responsible for the existence of the tower, but also created fundamental entities such as the cosmic turtle Maturin and the creature known as it. Ka, understood as the active expression of God's will, can be interpreted not merely as an abstract concept, but as a constant energy, a current of destiny flowing through all worlds, guiding events, connecting lives, and pushing characters toward their ultimate purpose. Although the shine, as a direct emanation of Ka, is not inherently good or evil, since it can be used for both acts of compassion and acts of destruction, the novels make one thing absolutely clear: Ka always fulfills itself. The destiny dictated by God's will inevitably manifests, even when characters attempt to resist. And in most cases, that purpose tends toward the good, even if the path to achieve it is filled with pain, loss, and sacrifice. This is because God, despite his interdimensional nature and incomprehensible power, is essentially a benevolent entity, a force that seeks to preserve the balance of the multiverse, even at a devastating cost to those caught in its current. Across the countless worlds, timelines, and parallel realities that make up Stephen King's narrative universe, there are certain individuals born with a special sensitivity to forces that transcend human logic. These people, although most never fully understand the origin of what they feel, possess an innate affinity with the influence of Ka, that silent current of destiny that flows through all things and represents the ultimate will of God. In many cases, this connection remains latent for years, hidden beneath the appearance of a normal life. However, when Ka so wills, or when the individual is pushed toward a specific role within the grand design of the multiverse, this affinity activates, giving rise to an extraordinary ability known as the shine. This awakening does not occur arbitrarily. The shine does not choose its bearers at random, nor does it follow simple or universal rules. On the contrary, its manifestation is deeply tied to each individual's personality, emotional history, traumas, and life circumstances. Some are born with this ability already active from childhood, while others develop it gradually over their lives, often after experiencing extreme events, irreparable losses, or life-altering situations that break the barriers of the ordinary mind. In this sense, the shine can be understood as a set of psychic, metaphysical, and supernatural abilities that emerge when human consciousness comes into direct contact with forces operating beyond time and space. As mentioned at the beginning of the analysis, This faculty does not adopt a single or predictable form. Instead, it manifests through an extraordinarily wide range of powers, each with different levels of intensity and control. Among the most common expressions of the shine are thought reading, extrasensory perception, the ability to feel others' emotions with disturbing clarity, and the capacity to anticipate future events before they occur. In other cases, the shine allows communication with spiritual entities or deceased individuals, breaking the boundary between life and death as if it were a mere illusion. Some bearers of the shine even develop healing abilities, being able to alleviate the physical or emotional pain of others, or to accompany people in their final moments, facilitating their passage. However, these abilities never appear identically in two different individuals. Each manifestation of the shine is unique, personal, and unrepeatable, making each bearer a singular case within Stephen King's multiverse. This variability reinforces the idea that the shine is not a power in the traditional sense, but a form of attunement to a higher energy that expresses itself differently depending on who channels it. Alongside these psychic manifestations are more physical and violent expressions of the shine, such as telekinesis or pyrokinesis, the ability to generate and control fire. The latter aspect is particularly revealing, as it suggests that the shine is not limited to the mind or the spiritual plane, but can directly alter matter and the laws of reality. The term shine originally comes from the novel The Shining, but within the broader Stephen King canon, it is used more flexibly to encompass virtually any type of supernatural ability certain characters manifest, regardless of its specific form. Within The Shining, the most emblematic and representative examples of this faculty are found in young Danny Torrance, as well as Dick Halloran, a key character whose relevance has gained renewed significance with his inclusion in the series IT Welcome to Derry. In both works, and especially in Dr. Sleep, the direct sequel to The Shining, it becomes clear that the shine of Danny and Dick primarily manifests through psychic and telepathic abilities. Thanks to this, both are able to communicate mentally, establishing a bond that transcends physical distance and the conventional limitations of language. This connection proves crucial in key moments of the story, such as when Danny, trapped in the Overlook Hotel and facing his father's increasing violence, manages to contact Dick Halloran for help. Through the shine, Danny sends a desperate call for aid that Dick perceives with complete clarity, even while hundreds of miles away. This exchange not only demonstrates the reach of the shine, but also its narrative function as a bridge between characters destined to meet by the will of Ka. In addition to mental communication, the shine grants them extraordinary sensitivity to places steeped in history and tragedy. Danny and Dick can perceive fragments of the past associated with specific locations, as if the walls retained echoes of the horrors that occurred there. Likewise, they can glimpse future events, although these visions usually appear fragmented, symbolic, and deeply disturbing. This connection also sharpens their perception of the supernatural and allows them to access intimate information about others without it being verbally expressed. A particularly revealing example occurs when Dick Halloran meets Danny for the first time and immediately knows that his parents call him Doc, a nickname inspired by Bugs Bunny. No one has told him, no one has hinted at it, and yet Dick knows. This moment functions as a silent confirmation that both share the same gift and are connected by an invisible force. During that first meeting, Dick takes the time to explain to Danny the basic nature of what he is experiencing. He tells him not to fear the Overlook Hotel, while acknowledging that atrocious events occurred there and that its history stretches back to very ancient times. He advises him not to let fear dominate him and clarifies that if he experiences disturbing visions or encounters spectral apparitions, he should not panic. According to Dick, These presences cannot cause him physical harm. To help him understand, he compares these visions to photographs in an album. Unsettling, shocking images, but static and incapable of interacting directly with him. In the film adaptation, this more reassuring attitude of Dick reflects a conscious decision. He considers that Danny's shine is not yet strong enough to face the full truth without serious psychological consequences, and prefers to shield him from unnecessary terror. However, he is also fully aware that the Overlook Hotel, and particularly room 237, does represent a real danger. Therefore, he leaves him a clear and direct warning. Under no circumstances should he enter that room. In contrast, in Stephen King's original novel, Dick Halloran assumes a much more active role as Danny's guide and mentor. He not only explains what the shine is, but helps him understand it, accept it, and develop a certain degree of control over his abilities. This master-apprentice relationship reinforces the idea that the shine is not simply a curse, but also a responsibility, a power that, if understood and properly channeled, can make the difference between succumbing to horror or facing it head-on. It is essential to make one thing very clear from the start. The affinity with the shine, as well as the abilities that stem from it, seems to have a clearly hereditary origin within Stephen King's narrative universe. However, this inheritance is far from following a simple or straightforward genetic logic. The shine is not transmitted linearly from parents to children, as if it were a common trait. Rather, it manifests irregularly, whimsically, and profoundly unpredictably. In many cases, this ability skips entire generations, remaining latent for decades before reappearing strongly in grandchildren or even great-grandchildren, even when the parents never showed the slightest indication of possessing it. This erratic behavior reinforces the idea that the shine is not merely a biological trait, but a spiritual and psychic predisposition that remains dormant until the right circumstances, or the will of Ka, awaken it. Not all descendants of a family line with the shine are destined to manifest it, and not all bearers even become aware of its existence. In many cases, the gift lies dormant for entire generations, like a hidden ember, waiting for the precise moment to ignite again. A direct and explicit example of this non-linear inheritance is mentioned by Dick Halloran in The Shining. He explains that both he and his grandmother shared this extraordinary ability. Thanks to it, they could hold extensive conversations without uttering a single word, communicating solely through thought, as if spoken language were unnecessary between them. This anecdote not only confirms the hereditary nature of the shine, but also demonstrates that a special compatibility can exist between certain members of the same family, facilitating much smoother and more natural mental communication. This same pattern recurs almost identically in Dr. Sleep with the character Abra Stone. The young girl states that her great-grandmother also possessed similar abilities, reinforcing the notion that an exceptionally powerful shine can remain hidden for several generations before manifesting with unusual intensity. Despite these long periods of latency, it is still considered an inherited ability, a seed that runs through the family line with no guarantee of blossoming in each generation. A particularly tragic and revealing case is that of Carrie White. When she attempts to understand the origin of her telekinetic abilities, one of the most violent and destructive manifestations of the shine, Carrie tries to explain to her mother that it is not witchcraft, satanic rituals, or demonic possession. From her perspective, what is happening is a natural, extraordinary, and terrifying talent, likely inherited from her grandmother or even a great-grandmother. This interpretation is especially ironic, as Carrie is unknowingly a bearer of an ancestral force that has remained hidden within her lineage for generations. In this specific case, the ability did not manifest in her mother, Margaret White, which explains why she possesses none of the shine's forms. However, Her extreme religious fanaticism leads her to interpret these abilities as an unequivocal sign of demonic corruption. For Margaret, the shine is not a gift or an inheritance, but an aberration that must be eradicated at any cost. This obsessive, fanatical belief ultimately drives her to attempt to kill her own daughter, convinced she is carrying out divine will. In this way, the shine becomes not only a source of power, but also the trigger for a profound familial and moral tragedy. Within the community of Stephen King followers and scholars, there is also the theory that both Wendy and Jack Torrance may have possessed an extremely weak or latent version of the shine. This hypothesis could help explain why both are able, at different moments, to perceive the presence of the supernatural entities inhabiting the Overlook Hotel. Jack, for instance, seems particularly susceptible to the hotel's influence, as if it could communicate with him more directly than with an ordinary person. Still, even if this sensitivity existed, its level was insignificant compared to the extraordinary and overwhelming power manifested by his son Danny, whose shine completely eclipses any hint of ability in his parents. Another crucial detail, much clearer in the novel The Shining than in its film adaptations, is the true nature of Tony, Danny Torrance's supposed imaginary friend. In reality, Tony is not an independent being or external entity, but a direct projection of Danny's shine. Due to his young age and inability to understand what is happening to him, Danny interprets this manifestation as a separate child living inside his mouth, communicating with him in a fragmented and cryptic manner. Essentially, Tony represents a part of Danny's subconscious, amplified by the shine, acting as a defense mechanism. It is an inner voice that guides him, warns him, and tries to prepare him for the horrors lurking in the Overlook Hotel. The name Tony is not coincidental. It comes from his middle name, as the boy's full name is Danny Anthony Torrance. This detail reinforces the idea that Tony is literally an extension of himself. The implications of this manifestation expand even further in Dr. Sleep, where it is unsettlingly suggested that Danny can communicate with a future version of himself. This implies that Tony is not merely a construct of his childhood mind, but an adult version of Danny who, from another point in time, can guide, advise, and warn him about events to come. If true, the shine would allow communication not only between minds, but also across time, completely blurring temporal boundaries. Adding to all these abilities is telekinesis, one of the most destructive and feared manifestations of the shine, as brutally demonstrated in the case of Carrie White. Carrie develops this power from a very young age and uses it, initially unconsciously, as a response to extreme stress. It is mentioned that she remembers causing a rain of stones when she was barely a child, an event that foreshadows the devastating potential of her abilities. However, it is after the extreme humiliation she suffers during the prom that her emotional trauma reaches a point of no return. At that moment, all psychological barriers containing her shine collapse, fully unleashing her powers. The result is an unprecedented explosion of psychic violence. Carrie uses her telekinesis not only to kill those who humiliated her in the gym, but also to unleash chaos across the entire town. Fires, explosions, electrical failures, and mass destruction spread like a chain reaction, plunging the surroundings into total collapse. This final outburst reveals an uncomfortable and terrifying truth. The shine, when combined with trauma, fear, and hatred, can become a lethal force capable of obliterating everything in its path. It is not simply an extraordinary gift, but a power that demands control, understanding, and balance. Otherwise, its manifestation can result in tragedies on a scale impossible to ignore. The shine is not limited solely to mental or perceptual manifestations. In some cases, this energy takes on overtly destructive and physical forms, capable of altering matter and defying the most basic laws of nature. One of the most extreme and feared expressions of this faculty is the absolute control of fire, a skill known as pyrokinesis. This variant of the shine is explored in particularly striking fashion in the novel Firestarter, where Stephen King takes the concept to a much more dangerous and visceral level. In this story, young Charlie McGee develops an almost symbiotic connection with flames, while her father, Andy McGee, possesses a different but equally unsettling ability: the power to directly influence the minds of others through a form of psychic control known as the push. The origin of these abilities is not natural, but the result of a series of clandestine experiments conducted by the government, in which Charlie's parents, Andy and Vicky McGee, participated. These tests, presented under the guise of harmless scientific studies, ultimately altered the mental and psychic structure of those involved in irreversible ways. Far from granting simple, isolated abilities, these experiments awakened latent telepathic faculties in both parents and, more importantly, artificially activated the shine. This detail is crucial, as it demonstrates that the shine does not always arise naturally or hereditarily, but can also be forced through external intervention with unpredictable consequences. As a result of this artificial activation, their daughter Charlie inherited a much more intense, unstable, and dangerous version of this power, amplified by her youth, lack of emotional control, and inability to comprehend the magnitude of what she possesses. Throughout the story, it becomes evident that Charlie's abilities grow at an alarming and terrifying rate. She is not only capable of generating fire without a visible source, but can shape, direct, and manipulate it as if it were an extension of her own body. The fire obeys her will with absolute precision, becoming a deadly weapon of surgical accuracy. Her level of control reaches such disturbing extremes that she can even detonate projectiles mid-flight before they reach her, demonstrating total awareness of her surroundings and superhuman reaction capacity. The most unsettling aspect of all is that this power resides in a child. Stephen King constantly emphasizes the contrast between Charlie's childhood innocence and the apocalyptic potential she harbors within. In this case, the shine ceases to be merely an extraordinary ability and becomes an existential threat, capable of reducing entire cities to ashes if unleashed uncontrollably. In fact, it is suggested several times that, if she were to reach maturity without limits or guidance, Charlie could become a living weapon of incalculable proportions. Another advanced manifestation of the shine is astral projection, a skill reserved for individuals with exceptional mastery of this psychic energy. In Dr. Sleep, this gift is masterfully employed by Rose the Hat, the charismatic and terrifying leader of the group of psychic vampires known as the True Knot. Thanks to this ability, Rose and other members of the group can send a mental or spiritual projection of themselves to distant locations, interacting with others without being physically present. Within the story, both Abra Stone and Rose the Hat use astral projection as a genuine weapon of psychological warfare. Through this intangible plane, they spy on, provoke, and attack one another, waging battles that leave no immediate physical traces, but can inflict profound emotional and mental damage. This ability demonstrates that the shine not only transcends space, but also allows conflicts to occur on levels of reality completely distinct from the material world. The shine can also manifest through psychometry, a faculty that allows one to obtain information about people, emotions, or past events through contact with objects they once owned. This ability appears in several characters in King's universe, including a member of the True Knot who can read an object's history simply by touching it, as if it retains psychic echoes of everything it has witnessed. Similarly, the shine can express itself as precognition, a form of supernatural intuition that allows glimpses of the outcomes of future events before they occur. A clear example is found in The Dark Tower, where young Jake Chambers demonstrates this special sensitivity by perceiving events that have yet to take place, as if his mind is synchronized with alternate temporal currents. This ability reinforces the idea that the shine allows one to observe fragments of Ka before they fully manifest. Another unsettling variation of the shine is dream walking, or the ability to enter and move within the dreams of others, particularly those with whom one shares a close emotional bond. This ability appears in Dreamcatcher, where several protagonists share the faculty of interacting within the same dream space, erasing the line between dream and wakefulness, and demonstrating that the shine can operate even when the mind is at its most vulnerable state. One of the most disturbing manifestations of the shine is, without a doubt, communication with the dead. In Pet Sematary, the character Louis Creed can see and converse with Victor Pacow, a deceased student who acts as a kind of messenger between worlds. Pacow warns him about the dangers of the old cemetery and the consequences of disturbing the natural order of life and death. This ability suggests that the shine allows one to pierce the veil separating the living from the dead, though doing so carries devastating risks. A comparable occurrence happens with Jack Torrance in The Shining. Although his connection to the shine is at best ambiguous, Jack begins to interact with the entities inhabiting the Overlook Hotel. These presences, far from being passive apparitions, exert a manipulative influence on his mind, feeding on his weaknesses, addictions, and resentment. In this case, the shine does not serve as protection, but as an open door to corruption. Finally, the shine can also express itself through healing abilities that verge on the miraculous, and even through the capacity to restore life. This aspect is particularly powerful in The Green Mile with the character John Coffey, one of the most extraordinary bearers of the shine in Stephen King's entire universe. His extreme telepathy explains his overwhelming empathy and profound understanding of human suffering, as if he were capable of feeling the pain of the entire world in his own body. John Coffey's healing abilities are unique even within King's canon. He can absorb diseases, physical injuries, and emotional suffering into himself, bearing this pain as a personal sacrifice. Subsequently, he has the ability to expel or transfer this negative energy to another entity, partially freeing himself from the burden he has assumed. The most astonishing aspect is that those he heals, including his little mouse, which he literally brings back to life, not only experience immediate relief, but also gain exceptional vitality, health, and longevity far beyond the norm. This detail suggests that the shine, when manifested in its purest and most compassionate form, not only repairs what is broken, but transcends the natural limits of human existence. In John Coffey, the shine becomes an act of absolute love, but also a curse, as each healing brings him one step closer to his own end. In Stephen King's vast literary universe, the shine manifests in countless forms, and one of the most interesting cases is found in The Stand. The figure of Mother Abigail serves as a paradigmatic example of how this faculty can transcend mere psychic perception to become a spiritual beacon. Unlike other bearers of the shine, whose focus may be defensive or even destructive, Mother Abigail uses it as a tool for guidance and summoning. During the global collapse caused by the devastating Captain Trips virus, she establishes a kind of invisible call, a mental signal that connects with those survivors seeking hope, protection, and meaning amidst the ruin. Thanks to this connection, the individuals affected by the pandemic feel an almost instinctive attraction toward her, as if guided by a higher force that transcends distance, fear, and despair. For Mother Abigail, these abilities are not simply a personal gift, but a divine grace. Her perception of the shine is deeply intertwined with faith. She interprets this faculty as an instrument of God, granted for the purpose of helping others. Therefore, she chooses to use it solely for altruistic purposes, guiding survivors toward reconstruction and justice, rather than for personal or selfish ends. In this sense, the shine becomes a means of spiritual connection, capable of weaving invisible threads between human minds, emotions, and destinies, functioning almost like a psychic fabric that unites the chosen under her guidance. In contrast, the Dead Zone presents us with Johnny Smith, a bearer of the shine whose manifestation is even more intense and complex. Unlike Danny Torrance or Dick Halloran, whose shine primarily focuses on the perception of thoughts and mental communication, Johnny develops the ability to receive extremely precise and detailed visions upon physical contact with people or objects. These visions are not limited to mere impressions. They allow him to access the past, interpret the present, and even anticipate future events. The wealth of information he receives makes Johnny a kind of intermediary between what is and what will be, a figure capable of altering the course of events through timely intervention. Thanks to this ability, Johnny collaborates with law enforcement, helping to solve crimes that would otherwise remain unsolvable. In particular, his intervention is crucial in the case of a serial killer, where his shine allows him to anticipate the criminal's movements, save lives, and prevent large-scale tragedies. However, this extraordinary gift also comes with a cost. Johnny is left emotionally torn, trapped between the information he perceives and the impossibility of intervening in every case he foresees. This pattern, the psychic power activated by trauma and suffering, recurs constantly in King's work. The awakening of the shine is often intimately tied to pain, fear, or deeply traumatic experiences. A paradigmatic example is Carrie White, whose powers emerge after experiencing her first menstruation in a context of extreme humiliation. The repression imposed by her mother, combined with ignorance about the changes in her own body and the cruel harassment from her schoolmates, generates a visceral terror that acts as a trigger for her latent abilities. What might have been a simple moment of adolescent discomfort for others transforms into an explosion of supernatural power that not only affects Carrie, but radiates outward, impacting everything around her. A similar process occurs with Danny Torrance, who begins to interact more clearly with Tony and manifest the shine more visibly after an incident with his father. Jack accidentally dislocates his shoulder during a fit of rage. This episode acts as an emotional catalyst, breaking the barrier that contained his shine and allowing him to connect fully with his psychic capacity. Violence, fear, and anguish function as fuel that activates and amplifies the shine in those who are attuned to it. In the Dead Zone, Johnny Smith experiences an equivalent awakening after a car accident leaves him in a coma for 5 years. Upon awakening, he has lost the woman he loved and an essential part of his life. This experience of suffering and personal loss acts as the trigger that allows his shine to manifest at full strength, transforming him into a tool capable of anticipating and altering the destiny of others. The relationship between trauma and the awakening of the shine is clear. The intensity of emotional pain functions as an amplifier of latent psychic abilities, turning extreme human experiences into catalysts for supernatural power. Another notable example of this dynamic is found in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. Brady Hartsfield, the central serial killer of the story, suffers an accident that leaves him in a coma at the end of the first book. During this period, his mind undergoes profound and dark changes. Upon awakening at the beginning of the third novel, the shine begins to manifest in him intensely and disturbingly. His telepathy develops to levels that allow him to influence the minds of others, control their thoughts, and manipulate behaviors, demonstrating that the shine does not always express itself for noble purposes, but can be a dangerous force in the wrong hands. Finally, There is a subtler but equally revealing example in Bag of Bones, where the protagonist, Mike Noonan, a writer, begins to experience supernatural phenomena that gradually reveal the presence of the shine. Through this energy, Mike develops the ability to perceive and communicate with spirits, as well as to distinguish between benign and malevolent entities. What is remarkable in this case is that his shine does not arise from extreme physical trauma, but from a complex emotional context marked by loss, nostalgia, and psychological vulnerability. This demonstrates that the shine can be activated in very diverse ways, depending on the combination of innate sensitivity and life circumstances of the individual. Within the story, the spirit of Sarah Tidwell emerges as the epicenter of a chain of murders that leave an indelible mark on the surroundings of the lake. Her presence is not merely ghostly. It is an active force that perpetuates a cycle of violence and terror, leaving behind a trail of death that links generations of victims. Sarah's entity acts with a clear will, capable of manipulating those who approach her territory, and her influence extends beyond the time and physical space of the lake, making any attempt at proximity an experience fraught with extreme danger. However, not all the presences inhabiting this place are hostile. Mike, the protagonist, receives help from benign entities, spirits he knew when they were still alive, who now intervene from the other side. These souls act as silent guardians, guiding, protecting, and warning Mike of the dangers that lurk. This type of interaction with the supernatural establishes a clear parallel with the shine of characters, such as Danny Torrance and Dick Halloran, who can also perceive, interpret, and communicate with forces that exist beyond the physical world. In all these cases, the line separating tangible reality from the spiritual plane becomes blurred, and the minds of shine-bearers function as a bridge capable of connecting both worlds in extraordinary ways. Within the Dark Tower novels, it is established that the shine, known there as the Touch of Two, is a concept widely understood by the inhabitants of Midworld, the homeland of Roland Deschain, the Gunslinger. It is suggested that almost anyone can access a minimal fraction of this energy, though in a very limited way and without perceptible effects for most. However, there are individuals with a superior affinity, capable of manipulating it with extraordinary control, understanding, and talent. This framework fits perfectly with what is observed in other King works, where certain characters literally shine with far greater intensity than the average person, standing out not only for their abilities, but also for their sensitivity to invisible forces and phenomena that others could not even perceive. Within this same framework, it is implied that Randall Flagg, known as the Man in Black, reaches unimaginable levels of power precisely because he possesses an exceptionally potent version of the shine or touch. Flagg is not just a formidable antagonist. He is a being who uses this energy to manipulate, corrupt, and control, demonstrating that the shine, when in the hands of malevolent individuals, becomes a lethal weapon capable of altering the fate of entire worlds. Similarly, Jake Chambers demonstrates remarkable sensitivity and uncommon mastery over this energy, allowing him to perceive alternate realities and communicate with entities that exist outside the normal timeline. All of the above reinforces the idea that the shine functions as an invisible, transversal current that indirectly but constantly connects a vast number of stories within Stephen King's universe. It is not merely an isolated narrative device. It is a guiding thread that links worlds, characters, and events, allowing the same force that guides Danny Torrance to, on another plane, empower Roland, Jake, or characters from entirely different stories, creating a coherent web of psychic and supernatural energy. However, although in many cases the shine represents an advantage, granting extraordinary abilities and an expanded perception of reality, it can also become an extremely dangerous burden. Those who possess this gift become vulnerable to the supernatural, transforming into prime targets for darker, more intelligent, and more powerful entities. A paradigmatic example is the Overlook Hotel, which is not just a building, but a malevolent entity with a will of its own. It feeds on the emotional energy of people, especially those who possess even a spark of the shine, using their fears and weaknesses to erode their minds and manipulate their behavior. Similarly, in Dr. Sleep, shine-bearers are hunted by the psychic vampires of the True Knot. These creatures kidnap, torture, and ultimately kill children with shine to absorb their life energy, which they call the steam. By consuming it, the vampires increase their power, prolong their life, and maintain health and youth that defy any natural limits. This conflict demonstrates that the shine, far from being a mere gift, is also a magnet that attracts dangers exceeding the defensive capacity of its bearers. The danger intensifies even further when a shine bearer comes into contact with entities of a superior or even cosmic nature. A particularly disturbing example occurs when Dick Halloran confronts it astrally within its lair. In this encounter, the creature senses Halloran's presence and responds with immense fury, challenging his intrusion and questioning with disdain his existence and audacity. What initially might be an exercise in psychic power and control quickly becomes a confrontation that tests the mental and emotional limits of the shine bearer. As a result of this contact, toward the story's conclusion, it subjects Halloran to a series of cruel and deeply disturbing visions. Through these images, Halloran's spirit is forced to face the dead who constantly haunt him, and the horrors of the past that remain latent in the lake and the Overlook Hotel. The intensity of these visions pushes him to the brink of madness, endangering his mental stability and bringing him dangerously close to committing an irreversible act against his own life. This episode dramatically underscores that, in Stephen King's universe, the shine is not merely a gift. It is a double-edged sword, capable of opening doors to perception and power, but also to extreme vulnerability and confrontation with horrors that the human mind can scarcely comprehend. Ultimately, the story of Sarah Tidwell and Mike, as well as the parallels with Danny Torrance, Dick Halloran, Jake Chambers, and Randall Flagg, show that the shine functions simultaneously as a force of light and darkness. It can be a source of protection, guidance, and power, but also a magnet for evil, a thread connecting the bearer to entities whose nature transcends the human. This delicate balance between benefit and risk makes the shine one of the most complex and fascinating forces in the entire King universe, a phenomenon that subtly but profoundly links stories, worlds, and destinies, demonstrating that all power carries both responsibility and inherent danger.